Welcome to Hood Word Stories. In this episode, I'll be discussing the life of Diablo. Jason Anthony Ryan was born in 1978 in the city of Banning, California. The city of Banning is located in Riverside County, California, situated in the San Gorgonio Pass. Historically, the city of Banning was composed of three barrios: El Sapo, which means the frog, El Chancla, which means houseshoe, and El Lagartillo, which means lizard, were all historic barrios in Banning, with roots established as early as the 1880s. The Southern Pacific Railroad was constructed through Banning in 1875 and 1876, and much of the workforce on the railroad were men of Mexican descent. Some of the areas that later became Chancla and Sapo were used for housing for the railroad workers and their families, and commercial ventures developed along Livingston Street in response to the new communities. Currently, the Sapos are the most active gang in Banning, with approximately 50 active members. Their stronghold is on the Eastside, and they war with several gangs in the area. Diablo was born into the Sapo gang. Growing up, his home was a party and kickback spot, and his mother would sell dope, which led to heavy traffic flow of fiends coming in and out the house. When Diablo was 6, his father was murdered. His father was in a physical altercation with the Crip at a liquor store, which led him to be stabbed 3 times in the heart and 8 times in the back. The year was 1984. In his early teen years, Diablo got his official put on and was a member of the Sapos gang. During this time, his life was very turbulent. He had no father, and his mother was on drugs, and had an alcohol addiction as well. Diablo would run the streets with his homies and rob houses to try and come up on some quick cash. When he was 16, Diablo and a few gang members jumped 2 smokers, ultimately stabbing one of them. Diablo got hit with assault with a deadly weapon and did 4.5 years in youth authority. He got out when he was 21 years old. Shortly after that, he picked up a violation for guns. He did another 11 months. He was released after 8. In 2000, he and another Sapo member got into a physical altercation with another man, which led to Diablo stabbing someone again. He was sentenced to 8 years in prison, but got out in 5 years. After 2 days of being released, he got hit with another gun charge and went back to serve another 32 months. At this point, his gang felt Diablo had earned his stripes, and Diablo was made leader of the Sapos gang. In 2016, Diablo's name was brought up to an incident that resulted in a murder. In May of 2016, Jeremy and his wife Norma moved into a housing complex in Banning, along with their newborn daughter and Norma's son Edgar. The complex was in an area claimed by the Sapos gang. 2 Sapos members, Arturo and his other cousin Frankie, lived in this complex. Shortly after Jeremy and Norma moved in, they had their first encounter with James, who was a Sapo gang member. James was walking down the street as Jeremy and Norma were getting out of their car. James stared at them really hard and said, "Where you guys from?" When Jeremy and Norma did not respond, James said, "Eastside Bandit Sapos." Norma and Jeremy went inside their home. Later, Norma went outside and saw James standing on the corner in the dark. She asked James, "What the fuck is your problem?" and told him they were a family that just moved in and did not want any trouble. She told James, "Don't be disrespecting us like that." James asked, "Well, what's your husband's problem?" Just then, Jeremy stepped outside, but Norma told him everything was fine, and that was it. The family encountered James again on June 5th, 2016. That day, a family reunion was being held at a park near the complex. Some of those in attendance were associated with the Sapos. When the reunion ended, a small number of the attendees gathered outside the complex, drinking alcohol and listening to music. At some point after the gathering started, Diablo showed up to the complex with James and a group of young gangsters. Diablo then started a confrontation with Richard, who was another Sapo gang member in attendance, about something that had happened between them in the past. Richard told Diablo it was a family gathering and not a place to be arguing. Diablo then pointed a gun at Richard's head and threatened to shoot him, and said, "I don't give a fuck about no family gathering." Meanwhile, Norma was inside the house checking on the children. While inside, she heard Jeremy talking outside in what she initially thought was a conversation, but then realized it was a confrontation. After Jeremy asked the men to keep the noise down, she heard someone asking Jeremy where he was from, if he had a problem, and if he wanted to catch a fade. Norma opened the door and saw Jeremy standing in the driveway. James and another Sapo member named Jerry were standing in front of him. James and Jerry were both saying things that were designed to provoke a fight. Norma tried to defend Jeremy by telling the men, "We have a right to be here. We pay rent." Both James and Jerry responded, "Nah, this Eastside Bandit Sapos." Norma then heard Edgar open the door. She turned around and told him to go back inside. When she turned back to face the men, James and Jerry had begun attacking Jeremy and were beating him up. Norma tried to separate the men from Jeremy and ended up on the ground tussling with James. She heard Jeremy tell James, "Get off my wife," before Norma could get up. A woman started pulling her by her hair, and Norma and another woman began fighting. As she fought with the woman, Norma saw Jerry attacking her son Edgar. James continued to fight Jeremy, and Norma saw their fight move towards the street. Norma then saw a third heavyset guy approach the scene, carrying what looked like a knife. She saw him making a passing motion to James at some point. She then saw James chasing Jeremy down the street making slashing motions. At some point, Norma realized Jeremy was hurt. She saw him making his way towards the driveway of their house. Everybody, including James and Jerry, had scattered. As they fled, Norma heard Jerry tell someone, "I stabbed that fool 10 times. Despite medical attempts to save him, Jeremy died from his injuries. He suffered a total of 20 stab wounds. Edgar also sustained multiple lacerations to his shoulders and chest. The DNA profiles of James and Jerry matched DNA found on beer cans collected from the complex. A fingerprint on one of the beer cans matched that of Diablo, although multiple witnesses claimed they saw him in the mix. Diablo was not charged for this murder. James and Jerry were convicted of first-degree murder and 2 counts of assault with a deadly weapon. Diablo first began rapping in 2008 after he was released from prison. His music started picking up momentum in the late 2010s, with music videos pulling in millions of views. He linked up with Mr. Criminal and his career was starting to take off. His future was looking bright, but in 2021, a murder took place. Diablo is the brother of Sonia. Sonia began dating Daniel in 2013 when they lived in Banning. It continued to do so until September of 2020, when he moved out of California to try and better himself. In November of 2020, Daniel called Sonia and told her he was going to take the bus back to California. Sonia picked up Daniel in West Covina and drove him back to Banning, where he stayed with Sonia and other members of her family for about 10 days. And then, over Sonia's objection, moved to his sister's house. Sonia then stopped all contact with Daniel on the night of January 11th, 2021. Daniel showed up to Sonia's home unannounced. He had paid her a visit in the hope of convincing her not to break off the relationship. An argument ensued, and Daniel became physical, grabbing Sonia at one point before snatching her mobile phone and purse, which contained $450 in cash, then running away. Sonia then went inside the house, woke Diablo up, and told him that Daniel had taken her handbag. Diablo then drove to Daniel's sister's home. When Diablo knocked on the door and asked for Daniel, Selena, who also lived at Daniel's sister's house, answered and said he was not there. Diablo instructed Selena to tell Daniel that if he did not return with Sonia's handbag, that he was going to put a hole in him. Sonia and Jonathan drove around looking for Daniel. During the drive, she called her own cell phone. Daniel answered and told Sonia to go to a certain location by herself if she wanted the handbag. When Sonia arrived at the location with Jonathan, Daniel saw Jonathan in the vehicle, smashed Sonia's phone, and ran off with her handbag. Daniel later sent Sonia a message on Facebook saying that he would leave the handbag in her father's truck. When Sonia retrieved the handbag the next morning, all the money and a vape pen were missing. Between 8:01 and 8:04 a.m., Diablo exchanged messages on Instagram with another user. Diablo told the other user that he had been hunting some lame all night long, and that being the driver and the shooter sucks. About 10 minutes later after the Instagram exchange, Diablo knocked on the door of Daniel's sister's house. Diablo told her to tell Daniel to come outside and take a ride with him. Daniel refused. He went to his room and shut the door. Diablo then busted in the door, went to Daniel's room and asked, "Why you gonna make me do this to these people? You think it's okay to fuck with my family and I'll fuck with yours?" Diablo also asked Daniel whether he broke Sonia's cell phone and whether he had any money. Daniel answered that he'd come up with the money in a couple days. Diablo responded, "By the time I come back, you better have that fucking money." Diablo then exited the house, re-entered with a gun, and fired 2 shots at Daniel. He then walked out. Daniel died of a gunshot wound to the chest. Diablo fled in his car, while Daniel's 3 roommates also tried to flee, not wanting to be questioned by officers, who swarmed the location after receiving reports of shots fired. When police arrived, they found Daniel's corpse laying face down on the kitchen floor. They found no weapons near the corpse, but did find a machete under the mattress in Daniel's room. Diablo later claimed he shot Daniel because Daniel jumped at him. He thought Daniel was going to hit him with the machete, and he needed to defend himself allegedly. All 3 witnesses were stopped by police and detained for questioning, culminating in Diablo being identified as the shooter. Relying on their statements and security surveillance videotape from locations near the residence that showed Diablo coming and going, Banning police obtained a warrant for Diablo's arrest. Diablo was located on Amherst Drive on January 20th, 2021, and taken into custody without incident. Following a 2-week trial, Diablo was convicted of first-degree murder. He was sentenced to 80 years to life in prison. Diablo is currently serving his sentence in Pelican Bay. I'd like to thank you guys for watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe.